today with Elizabeth Keating, and we're going to interview her about her time that she spent traveling on the SS Nenana, steamer Nenana. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Well, my name's Elizabeth Keating, and I grew up in a village called Holigachuk, a village of about 100 people on the Inoko River near Shagluk now. It is no longer there because the river washed it away, but that's where I spent my first 14 years of life.
And about how old were you when you traveled on the Nenana?
14.
You were 14, so you weren't a little kid. You were older. Where were your family traveling to? Where were you going?
Well, what was left of my family, my father and I, older brothers and sisters, were in boarding schools. So when my grandmother died, who raised me, my father got me out of the village as quickly as possible. So just he and I traveled together. And so we caught the steamboat in Holy Cross and came all the way to Nenana, which is, what it did. And from there we caught the train to Anchorage and Seward. From Seward we got a ship down to Seattle. And then from Seattle, we branched out and visited I suppose my relatives too, but they seemed like strangers.
Well, this was a total life change for you, totally different life.
It was dramatic. I barely spoke English. I spoke enough to get by with my father, who wasn't native, but I spoke primarily native because I was raised by my grandparents who didn't speak English. So it was just a brand new, total experience. And, I looked forward to it because I loved to read, so in school I read about things, that were different than us. But still, experiencing it was another matter. I didn't know about flush toilets. Well, my girlfriend Dolly had grown up in the Nenana mission, so they had flush, running water and things like that. We didn't in the village. We were totally primitive.
Yes.
And so she told me their outhouses are in-houses, and you'll have to flush a toilet. There's water in the toilet. Right. And so the first couple of times I used the bathroom, I didn't know how to flush it. So about maybe the third time, sometime later, I got brave enough to look around. I thought, well, how do you flush it? She didn't tell me that part. Well, there was this chain hanging down, and I thought, I'll pull it. And I thought it would, and I went running out of there, and luckily nobody was coming. I'd have knocked them down. So it's an embarrassing story, but
I can relate. Because this is something you'd never seen before. I can relate. How about the villages that you traveled by? Do you remember how many different villages you went by?
Well, I know parts of the river. From Holy Cross, probably the next place was Anvik, and then probably Kaltag, Nulato, Galena, and maybe Ruby, and Tanana probably. And I think we paused at Tolovana because they had an arrangements with the school teachers who lived there to either receive or send. So we paused there a bit, and then I don't know, about the 5th or 6th day we got to Nenana.
About what year was this when you were
1947.
Okay, because I was hearing that you didn't stop to get wood, so they had switched the engines.
They did stop to get wood, but I was used to that part because we cut wood for them along the villages, and there was a stack of wood across from our fish camp on the Yukon. So they stopped there periodically and picked up wood while we were living in the fish camp. So I knew about that part, and I didn't pay much attention to that.
Yeah, they switched the engines over later on, so I was thinking, but that must have been pretty interesting for you in your fish camp, looking at this big boat stop. And did you always wonder what was looked like inside? Well,
when we saw it coming from 9 miles up the river, we had to pull our boats up the shore so that they wouldn't get washed away, because Nenana had a huge wake, and it could wash our boats out if we didn't. So we had to run around and secure our boats as it was coming.
That's right. Can you remember what kind of meals they served on the boat? What did you eat?
Well, fancy compared to me, because I ate native foods, soups and meat and fish, and they served eggs for breakfast, which my dad used to do that once in a while, because I didn't live with him, but I, visited him a lot. But I had breakfast with my dad. He probably ordered for me, but they weren't, I think, probably eating steaks, but we kind of had, I don't remember anything unusual about the meals, I mean, they were fancy, and they were on schedule and so forth. We ate when we were hungry, so that part, it's when we got on the ship from Seward that it was much more formal.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty formal on the Nenana compared to what I was used to, but it was really formal on the shipboard, big shipboard.
Right. Yes.
But it was interesting, and they served, my dad had a store, so he would order oranges and apples and things like that, but bananas were usually spoiled by the time they got there, so I think I had various fresh fruits that I probably, and I know the other native boys that worked on the steamboat, they talked about having all the fruit they wanted, but I was only there as a passenger for 5 days or so.
Right.
But it was fun meeting all the passengers from along the river,
Oh, yes.
And I'm related to everybody in Caltag and Nulato and some in Galena, so it was nice. We stopped there for a few minutes and they allowed us off board, and my family, get lined up to say goodbye to us.
Is there any special memory, the unusual memory? You'd mentioned something about the purser interacting with you and kind of playing with you as kids, or am I thinking of somebody else?
I don't know. Well, I knew a lot of the boys that were working on the ship, and I think they weren't supposed to really hobnob with us.
Right.
But I probably violated the rules, and they had to be polite to me, because one of the boys I had seen before elsewhere. I don't know if you want the whole sordid story, but when I was 11 years old, he was on the plane, and us kids from the village would run out to the plane when it landed, any plane, that was just exciting.
Yeah.
And he didn't get off the plane, he was on his way to Holy Cross. I was 11 years old at the time, and he was 3 years older than me, so he was probably about 14 or 15. And I looked in there, and he was this gorgeous guy,
Yes,
and I wasn't really interested in boys, but he was beautiful.
Right.
He had these beautiful blue eyes, light blue eyes. I thought, man, I mean, we didn't have any blue-eyed people in our village.
That's
and
right.
I think I'd never seen one before, and I'm sure I just stared at him, and I didn't know about polite behavior. Well, I knew I wasn't supposed to stare, but I did. And he just looked back at me, and then I found out later that his name was Mike Dementive. And I said, wow, I've never seen anybody like that. My father was white, but I didn't pay much attention to how he looked, and I had never seen many white people. And Mike wasn't white, but he was, probably half or whatever, and he had the white features, especially those blue eyes. Wow. So I didn't think much about it, and I didn't know who he was. Later, I was told, in the villages, we're interested in every little thing, whether it's our business or not, because we had very little new things happening,
That's right.
So somebody said that boy's name was Mike Dementive. So, and then later, we listened to Tundra Topics on the radio. My dad had fashioned, we didn't have electricity or anything like that, but my dad had taken some car batteries and set up a system so he could listen to the radio a few minutes a day.
Yes.
And so he listened, I think probably in the morning. I didn't live with him, but in the evening I went to his house to listen to the Tundra Topics, I think it was called. It was a nightly news, and we heard news from all over the world. And then right after that, there was a little bit of music for about 10 or 15 minutes, and you could write in and request, and what do you call it? Send it to someone, I forget what that's called. Well, so Mike Dementive requested a song for a girl named, I can't think of her name, Frida Holmberg.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, he's got a girlfriend named Frida Holmberg. And so then when I was 14, we went to Holy Cross, and I went to Frida's dad, Alec Holmberg, was my dad's partner in their youth. Mm-hmm. And my dad couldn't climb the hill because of arthritic knees. They lived up on a hill. So he told me to go up there and tell Alec he couldn't come up because he couldn't walk, and to wish him well that he was taking me outside.
Yeah.
So I went up there and I got acquainted with Frida and some of her sisters, mm-hmm. and she had lots of brothers too. So she walked, after I gave Mr. Holmberg his message, she walked me around town, so we spent the afternoon together. And then I don't know when we boarded. Oh, we walked towards where the steamboat boarded, and Mike and some other boys were working on the steamboat. Okay. His brothers and two cousins that I met, and there are probably others, but those are the ones I met.
Right.
So he said, "Hi, Liz," to me, mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. I said to Frida, "He knows my name. I wonder how he learned my name." Anyway, so when we got on the boat, then somehow I met him, and of course I was 14 years old and beginning to be really interested in boys, and man, he was the cream of the crop, you know. So we had a nice big romance on the steamboat, my first ever, you know.
Was that your first kiss?
Huh?
Was that your first kiss, baby?
No, I'd been kissed by older guys who, you know, were being improper, and, but it was the first kiss I wanted and enjoyed.
Right.
And so we had a very nice time on the boat, and all his free time we would spend together.
Yeah.
And then I met his cousins, you know, and I have pictures. I meant to bring them.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
So I can send them to you.
That would be
I have
great.
a picture he wouldn't take a picture with me. He was camera shy. And I didn't have the skills to say, well, I'll have something to look at, you know.
Right.
But his cousin Luke, you know, I talked to you about Luke Dementive. Luke has passed away now, but Luke, I have a nice picture of Luke with his arms around me. And then another one with another cousin, another Dementive. What was his name? I forget his name. My memory, I'm 90 years old, you know, memory kind of, when I want to say something, the word floats away really fast.
Right, I can relate.
Yes, George Dementive. So we have a nice picture of me and George and Clara McCarty from Ruby. And do we have another? Well, then Mike had a cousin named Ray, who was very shy, and he said hello to me and things, but he stayed out of that. But those three boys and I, Mike and Luke, are brothers. So we frequently, and there were other people, women, Lillian Walker, Mrs. David Walker was on the boat, and you know, I'm related to the Walkers, so they would have music sessions. All these people were musical except me, and so I sat in and listened to all them at night.
Did you go downstairs to where the crew were, or because they weren't supposed to go up? So where did you guys
That's right, but
meet?
for some reason, Mike and his cousin Ray had a cabin on our floor. I think that Ray took care of the, you know, hotel type change sheets and that sort of, And I don't know what Mike did, but I saw him, you know, go to his room and so forth. But he probably worked below deck. And then a lot of times the guys would gather during a break out on the deck, the front deck, and they would play music, and I would listen. I and others would listen. And I don't know what, I think she was called Mrs. Jessen, from the Jessen Weekly. Was on the boat with her daughter, and so I palled, her daughter was a little bit younger than me, but we palled around together, and during the day we were each other's company.
Well, this was a really neat adventure for you. Your first time you saw electricity, flushing toilets, running water, and then you made all these friends, and then you got the adventure around the boat, and a lot of music. It sounds like it was pretty fun.
It was marvelous. I loved it. And I was sad about leaving. He was this boy I adored. And,
absolutely. Yes. Now they talk about how quiet the boat was, the engines. Do you remember hearing the engines, or was it just the wheel that you heard going?
I don't remember, because I was used to outboard motors and things like that. So, and I went on the back and watched the wheel turn. That was fascinating to me. The dining, the formal dining was interesting, but I think I had too much, I had an information overload,
Yes.
so that I didn't register everything.
Right.
But everything I did was brand new.
Yes,
It was
yes.
not anything I'd done in my life before.
Right.
Yeah, and so we got off in Nenana, of course, and one of my aunts lived in Nenana, so we went to her house. But I wanted to spend as much, and Mike had time off, so we walked around town, and he bought me my first ever ice cream cone, and
That's a wonderful story. Yeah. Well, we thank you for coming and meeting with us and sharing with us, because we've interviewed a few crew members, but we've not interviewed passengers. So that's a whole other side of the story that we're eager to learn. What was it like to travel on the Nenana?
it was wonderful. They catered to us, and I felt pampered, It just, I have nothing but marvelous memories.
One of the things that we haven't been able to really find out for sure in the rooms, the sinks they had, did they pull down from the wall, or was it a mounted sink? Do you remember?
I vaguely remember bunk beds. My dad slept on the bottom, and I think they were just like bunk beds.
Yes,
they may have pull downs in some of the rooms, but I didn't see that. And then Lillian Walker, one of my cousins, was also in a couple of doors away from us, and I spent the night with her sometimes, because we were friends too. So,
Right.
And she was having a romance as well. She was a beautiful girl, just beautiful, breathtaking.
This has been really interesting. I'm so glad that we got a chance to visit and talk and share. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.